We are following a big development in the case of a mom who locked her 7-year-old daughter in an apartment closet for weeks. It left the girl malnourished, starving, and with brain damage that may last a lifetime. No longer is this an alleged case of abuse. Virginia Gonzales just accepted a plea deal. We're talking about the mom who was out partying as her other daughter had been missing for years. And per a new report, that girl may be dead. I'll tell you how long Virginia Gonzales is expected to spend in prison and why her story isn't over yet. We're on The Case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Virginia Gonzales was scheduled to go on trial January 26th on charges that she locked her 7-year-old daughter in a closet for weeks, leaving the girl with lifelong health problems, including brain damage. But something in her case changed in a big way this week. Court records that we have out of Austin, Texas, show that Virginia Gonzales is pleading guilty to 2 charges of injury to a child, elderly, or disabled person with intent. Now, we'll talk about how long Gonzales is expected to go to prison for in just a moment. And I'll be clear that we're just talking about one of what appears to be 2 cases involving Virginia Gonzales. Now, this is the same mom, a mom, by the way, who has at least 7 kids who we have videos of out partying and living the fast life. Now, no judgment here on anyone going out and about with kids at home. But when these videos were taken, she had a daughter who was missing, a girl who is still missing and has been missing for years. The name of that girl is Ava Marie Gonzales. Now, this is her picture from when she was just 2 years old. This picture was taken in roughly 2017, and that is the last time that anyone has ever seen Ava Gonzales to this day. Ava was never reported missing, and police had no idea that she actually even existed until they started investigating Gonzales after they came upon that disturbing case of abuse involving one of her other daughters, which is the case that she just accepted this plea deal for. Now, we're following some new information this week about Ava Marie. This is the picture that law enforcement put out of what she may look like today if she were still alive. I mean, it's been roughly a decade since she was last seen. Sadly, we'll talk about why police may believe the search for Ava may not have the ending that all of us are hoping for. But I want to lay out for you right now what Gonzales is pleading guilty to, because we have the arrest affidavit, and I will warn you, in this case, it's not only incredibly sad, it's incredibly disturbing, the details that are in this police document, but they're important to talk about. On August 3rd, 2025, police were called to an apartment building on Ross Road in Austin, Texas. They received a 911 call from a grandmother who said her daughter, Virginia Gonzales, had been arrested that morning. Now, she said when she went into the apartment, she found her 7-year-old granddaughter in a bedroom closet. The grandmother said that the 2 closet doors were tied shut with a charging cable to prevent that young girl from getting out. There was also a large plastic box against the door to make it impossible for a young girl to escape. Now, inside that apartment, there were 7 of Virginia Gonzales's children, and their ages were between 14 down to just 2 years old. Now, the children told their grandmother, who is Virginia Gonzales's mom, that Virginia put that 7-year-old girl in the closet because she felt like she had issues controlling her bladder and she was, quote, always getting into stuff. Now, it would be disturbing for any parent to do this to a child in any situation, but in this case, the 7-year-old girl, when she was found, when she was rescued, she weighed just 29 pounds. That's the weight of a toddler. We're talking about a girl who's 7 years old. On top of that, according to this arrest document, the girl had dark colored spots on her body, and doctors say that showed that she was malnourished. And this next line, it really breaks your heart, because the girl told medical staff at the hospital that, quote, her bones hurt. Doctors wrote that the young girl, quote, exhibits profound loss of subcutaneous fat stores across her body, including evidence of moderate to severe cerebral atrophy from her prolonged malnutrition, which she will never recover. So in plain terms there, doctors are saying that this girl was starved so bad and for so long that she will have brain damage for a lifetime. Law enforcement believes that the little girl had been in that closet for 3 weeks, if not longer. Law enforcement then interviewed the 7-year-old siblings. Remember, there were 7 kids in total in this apartment. And those kids told detectives that Virginia had forced the older children to clean the closet after the 7-year-old girl would go to the bathroom there because she was just kept in this closet for so long and was not allowed out. They also say that the 7-year-old only ate and drank while she was in the closet, that she was fed a hot dog or a corn dog in the morning and at night, and that was it. She was also only given a half cup of water. According to the arrest affidavit, the fridge, it was stocked. Fries, hamburger meat, ice cream, bread, fruit, everything needed to feed a child. And yet this girl was less than 30 pounds. Now, the morning that police made this discovery, Virginia Gonzales was arrested in Austin for possession of marijuana. And by this point, you probably are starting to get an opinion on who Virginia Gonzales is. Her own mom told police that after finding that 7-year-old girl, quote, Gonzales never showed love or cared for the victim. She said that Virginia treated this girl differently than the others. Now, Virginia Gonzales's arrest in the child abuse case, sadly, it was just the beginning of what police would find related to her. In the course of their investigation, they also discovered that Virginia didn't just have 7 children. She had an 8th child. It was a girl who no one had seen since 2017.
During the investigation, police discovered that there was an 8th child who was not found inside the home. The missing 9-year-old child was identified as Ava Marie Gonzales. Missing persons detectives determined that Ava was last seen in December 2017 when she was 2 years old and in the custody of her mother, Virginia Marie Gonzales. Virginia Gonzales was arrested on April 24th, 2025 for injury to a child, serious vital injury, for the injuries sustained by her 7-year-old child. Austin Police Department's missing person detectives are seriously concerned about Ava's welfare, given the circumstances in which Ava's 7-year-old sibling was found.
Guys, real quick, I want to get real because credit card debt is something too many people are dealing with. It should never be commonplace, but it is something that can feel like a trap. Today's sponsor, PDS Debt, helps people fight back. Whether it's credit cards, personal loans, or medical bills, PDS Debt has customized options to help you pay off debt faster. No minimum credit score required. Plus, they're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. We all know that credit card debt is a problem, and you might know people who are struggling with it, looking for a way out. This can be the answer because it's your money, it's your future. Don't let the system decide for you. You're 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/OTC. That is pdsdebt.com/OTC, pdsdebt.com/OTC. Now, according to police, Ava was never reported missing. And just to add to that, there are no records of any of the Gonzales kids ever being in school. So there's no record for schools to track or report. And while Gonzales's child abuse case does appear to be settled, and again, we'll talk about what her prison sentence could look like in just a moment, this week there was a major development in the investigation into what may have happened to Ava Marie. Police in Austin have filed a search warrant authorizing detectives to gather information for what they are calling a murder investigation. KXAN TV in Austin has the court documents, and they reportedly lay out several conflicting stories about what may have happened to Ava, what people heard over the years about this missing girl. And it appears that Gonzales's oldest son may have the account that could crack this case and crack it in the saddest way. So court records state that Child Protective Services were told in November of 2023 that Ava had moved in with her dad. It's in a document that was signed by a grandmother of Gonzales's children, or at least it seemed that way, because when that grandmother was questioned about the document, she said that wasn't her signature. And they also say that the phone number on the document, it wasn't hers either. Police then spoke with a former boyfriend of Gonzales, who is the dad of one of her children, and he said that Gonzales told him that Ava was her sister's child and that Ava was living with her aunt and her uncle. Now, that ex-boyfriend also told police that Gonzales called Ava a, quote, crack baby who was born premature and was sickly and who had health problems and looked malnourished. But police say when they looked at hospital records, Ava was born full term and she was born at a healthy weight of 6 pounds with no complications. So police also say they then eventually get in touch with Ava's alleged father, and that's a man who lives in Mexico. And he told investigators that Gonzales told him that Ava was living with another family in San Antonio and that he never had custody of the girl. Now, it appears that one of the only witnesses to Ava is her now 14-year-old brother, who was 6 years old at the time that Ava was last seen. He told investigators in a forensic interview, according to KXAN TV, that when he was 6 years old, they were in a motel, and in the motel bathroom, he heard Ava screaming, quote, really bad. And he claims that he saw his mom violently assaulting Ava in the bathtub with the water running. Now, he says when the water turned off, the screaming stopped. He says that he then saw his mom put clothes on Ava and put her in a car seat. He described her looking like she was sleeping. He then claims that his mom said that Ava was going to live with a new mom and dad. He never saw his sister again, and he said that after that happened, his mom, Virginia Gonzales, she was happy. She was like a totally new person, according to the boy. Now, according to these documents obtained by KXAN, police believe that Ava died on or around January 2nd, 2018, and they believe that she was killed by her mom, Virginia Gonzales. Now, at the time of this recording, Virginia has not been charged in connection to Ava. She had only been facing the charges in connection to that abuse case where she just accepted the plea deal. So I spoke to a woman named Leanne, and she is someone who considers herself a former friend of Virginia Gonzales. She said back in the day, they used to run in the same circles, and she ended up giving some information to us about what Virginia Gonzales was like.
I think she had a real good way of hiding things, being very discreet with things, very manipulative, plotting the grandmas, her mom and the grandma that was involved with the kids against each other so they wouldn't speak with one another. She was a mastermind. She thought she had control of everybody is what I'm seeing now.
I also asked Leanne in our conversation about Ava and if there was anything she knew about what might have happened to that little girl.
So when I first met her, I only knew of 3 little boys. I never knew Gina even had a girl. And then years passed through, and recently, about 2 years ago, she popped up out of nowhere. Mind you, she was living in San Antonio with her baby daddy with the 3 little boys, and she was, playing house. So nobody's seen her. And then randomly she pops up. When she popped up, that's when we started reconnecting and catching up. And she told me she had 3 more boys with that baby daddy. But I never knew she had a girl. Every mutual friend who I met her through, who knows her better than I do, all told me the same thing. Nobody knew about her having a girl. Back in the day, if we are correct, the 3rd little boy that she was saying was a boy was Ava, but she presented her as a boy back in the day. So after concluding that and confirming with multiple mutual friends, we all agreed that nobody knew about no girl.
How many fathers of her children does she have?
From what I know, there's about 6 or 7 fathers.
So heading into this week, it appeared that Gonzales was prepared to face charges in front of a jury in the abuse case. Her trial was slated to begin on January 26th, and she had reportedly already turned down a plea deal offer in the child abuse case in November. According to KXAN, Gonzales had rejected a plea deal on November 19th. Prosecutors back then were offering her 40 years in prison in exchange for a guilty plea on the charges of felony injury to a child. Now, not only did Gonzales say no deal to that, her attorney called the offer, quote, utterly absurd. But then you have this week, and this story breaks about the search warrant in a capital murder investigation into Virginia Gonzales. And Gonzales's attorney told KXAN that he was actually planning to file a continuance and for a request for this trial to be held outside Travis County, Texas, because he looked at that story coming out, the one about the search warrant, to be something that would taint a jury pool. He went on to say, in reaction to that search warrant story related to Ava coming out. Quote, by seeking this warrant at this time, they are effectively poisoning the jury pool by reintroducing these allegations into the news cycle just before the January 26th trial date. This creates an unfair bias and prejudice against my client, making it nearly impossible to select an impartial jury. To protect my client's constitutional rights, we have no choice but to seek a continuance and a change of venue. But then, a couple days later, if that, Thursday night, the news breaks that Virginia Gonzales has taken a plea deal in the abuse case. She is pleading guilty to 2 counts of injury to a child, elderly, or disabled person with intent. She will spend 25 years in state prison. Now, her attorney released a statement to KXAN TV in response to this plea deal saying, quote, my client is at peace with her decision. She has never claimed to be innocent. This case has always been about seeking justice and an appropriate punishment for her conduct. From the beginning, this matter has been handled differently than any similar case I have defended in the past 20 years. It is clear to me that there was an agenda involved beyond the pursuit of justice. Ultimately, my client was willing to accept an excessive sentence because she did not want to force her child to testify. That is Gonzalez's attorney, Gabe Hernandez, in a statement to KXAN TV. Joining us now from Texas to talk about this case and where it could go next is Anthony Asso, criminal defense attorney and former assistant district attorney. Thank you, as always, for being with us on Law and Crime. 25 years for Virginia Gonzales. You know, when you're talking about, it's hard to say it in this term of like, is this a good deal? Because we are talking about a young girl who's going to have brain damage forever. And then Virginia Gonzales is going to prison, presumably for a long time. But in terms of coming to plea agreements with the evidence that it appears she was facing, what do you make of the decision to take the deal at 25?
I think it was probably a good deal for Miss Gonzales. I think that in the event that a jury sees pictures of a girl that's 29 pounds at 7 years old soaking wet, that's not going to go well. Really, to describe the alleged crime in this case, I think it's pure evil. And so she'll be eligible for parole in 12 and a half years because it's an aggravated offense under the laws in Texas. She's got to do half of her time prior to being parole eligible. Doesn't mean she'll get out, but she'll be eligible for parole. So I think it's a way to mitigate the amount of time that she could have ended up having had she gone to jury trial.
There was a report that she was offered a deal in this case. And again, we're just talking about the case of her daughter who was found in the closet, not the case of Ava Gonzales. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But in November, she reportedly turned down a plea deal for 40 years. What do you make of the decision to take 25? You know, certainly that's a lot less time that you're spending in prison, but I know that this story came out about Ava Marie Gonzales right around the time she accepted the deal. I guess, what type of impact did that make, would you say, on the decision to accept this plea deal?
Well, I think one of the things that the people need to consider is that the defense attorney in this case has to turn around and then talk to Ms. Gonzales and get Ms. Gonzales on board with accepting that kind of deal. So when we talk about numbers, 5 years in prison is a long time to anybody. 10 years is a long time. 15 years. Going all the way up to 40 years is a really long time. So on a case like this, she has to do 20 years in prison prior to ever being eligible for parole. A life sentence, which is the maximum amount she could get if she went to trial and was convicted by a jury and sentenced to the max, would be 60 years, right? That's what a life sentence is in Texas. So essentially, she'd be eligible for parole at 30 years. So in my eyes, I think that from a defendant's perspective, it's a 10-year difference. Do I gamble and try to get a lesser sentence at the risk of having to do 10 more years before I'm eligible for parole? And when you attack it from a probability standpoint, there's an element of logic involved in that.
When it comes to the evidence that was against her in the child abuse case, because just reading through the arrest warrant, I mean, it's so sad and it's so damning. And you have this girl who doctors are saying is never going to recover from brain damage. You have witnesses of the other children. I know in the attorney's statement for Virginia Gonzales, from their side, it was, well, she wanted to make sure that her daughter or her kids wouldn't testify against her. But if you're a prosecutor and you had her, from what it appears, dead to rights, to convict her of this to the highest sentence, like, why offer a plea deal in a case like this?
Well, I have to comment on the comment saying that Miss Gonzalez didn't want to put her kids through trial.
Sure.
Clearly, she wouldn't have cared if the offer was 40 years. She was willing to put them through trial at 40 years until the offer was sweet enough. So that's a little bit disingenuous, which I'm not surprised based on the allegations and behavior we've heard she's capable of. But I think from a prosecutor's perspective, they do have an interest in not putting a 14-year-old on the stand. Imagine what that 14-year-old boy has already gone through, having to witness his 7-year-old sister in the closet, feed her. I mean, it's horrible. And then couple that with what he's reported to have heard from the prior case in 2018 or the prior investigation. It's irreversible trauma. And so there is an element of wanting to protect the children, get finality in a sentence, and not have them go through the emotions that are involved in a full-blown jury trial.
You have these two cases, and when police arrested her, they made this announcement that, hey, not only did we find this girl in the closet and she has terrible, terrible injuries,
right.
By the way, we think she actually has an 8th child, and that child hasn't been seen since 2017. And I remember watching that news conference, like my jaw drops, and you're like, how is this possible? But that story has been out there from the very beginning. And yet she hasn't been charged with the disappearance of that girl. And I know when this story came out, her attorney was saying that we should file a continuance. We can't go to trial in the child abuse case. This is muddying the waters of a jury pool. Had they moved forward, had he filed that, would there have been an argument that the jury pool would have been tainted because this other story was out there that she hasn't been charged with yet?
Chris, in Austin, I think that's less likely. I mean, Austin's a huge city. You've got people flooding in from all over the country. So the population is large enough that you could go through voir dire and sort of weed out the people that have read this story, that have knowledge of the facts. That's very different than if we're trying a case in Amarillo, Texas, right, where your population's far less and your jury pool or your number of jurors that could potentially be on the jury is way less. So I don't know that there's a lot of teeth in that argument, but anytime, a defense attorney has to make the argument, and I think that in the end of the day, he wants to protect the record as well as his bar card.
Now, turning to Ava Gonzales, and it's just, I know we've seen stories before where social services, we talk about it often, they're overworked, understaffed, and we do see kids fall through the cracks. But the idea that this girl just vanished in 2017 when she was 2 and no one's seen her, heard of her ever since, and it's kind of just like anecdotes between people of, oh, I heard she was here or there. Like, it's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have this story that comes out where, according to the search warrant that KXAN TV has, that the 14-year-old son of Virginia Gonzales tells this story that appears to be the only eyewitness to what happened in a motel, he says, where it sounds like from that Virginia Gonzales allegedly killed Ava Marie Gonzales. And we'll see if she's ends up being charged with that. But beyond the boy's word, what more would you need to charge and then try Virginia Gonzales on murder, especially if you don't have a body?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really case dependent, Chris, because I think the general assumption is no body, no case. And that's not true. There are murders that are filed where you don't have a body, because in reality, or the reality is in certain situations, bodies disappear. So it really boils down a lot to witness testimony as well as scientific evidence surrounding the area of purported crime scenes, right? So in this instance, I think what we're finding out is that Ms. Gonzales made statements in her April interview in 2025 that had to do with the location of her daughter, Ava Gonzales. And I think since there are suspicions now that she's responsible for her disappearance, they have now sought witnesses out that she talked about who are making contradictory statements to what Ms. Gonzales is saying. So now she's being caught in potential lies. The child is not where she said the child was. And I think that could be used in addition to what the 14-year-old boy said to sort of bootstrap a case together for a capital murder.
When it comes to proving someone's guilty of that beyond a reasonable doubt, and we don't know, we know that detectives right now, it appears they're trying to gather evidence to build this case. But I mean, can you get a conviction off, you have people who are saying, well, I heard it was someone else's child. I heard the baby, went to Mexico. I heard the baby, was living with an aunt and uncle in San Antonio. To have those statements, and then at the same time to have this boy telling this terrible, terrible story. Is that enough? You know, do you need the science, you know, to say like maybe her at the motel or, you know, some DNA evidence to prove that she actually murdered somebody? Can you get a conviction without that?
No, Chris, you don't need the science. It's something we've voir dire on. I've voir dired on when I was a prosecutor, and I've got to deal with as a defense attorney is that witness testimony alone is enough to get a conviction. And so a good prosecutor is going to ask that question and weed out and strike for cause jurors that are going to require them to bring science, DNA, and things like that into a case. Because in the end of the day, a witness's testimony, if credible, can be enough for a conviction. So I think when we look at this case, if Ms. Gonzales' 14-year-old son takes the stand and says that he witnessed this horrible occurrence, she can't take the stand. So she's not really going to be able to defend herself with her word. They're going to have to just poke holes in his story. And that might be difficult when they can play her statement and then show witness after witness, talk about all the inconsistencies with where her child is. And she's never reported the child missing.
I know that they, in the search warrant, it said that this was a capital murder investigation, death penalty state in Texas. Ava Gonzales was incredibly young if she was actually murdered. I mean, what are some of the circumstances that put this in the realm that she could face the death penalty if she was convicted? Well, certainly she needs to be charged first, but then convicted of this.
Well, when we talk about capital murder, if the state files a motion or, you know, an intent to seek death and they make the case, they can seek death, right? So that's when it comes to capital murder, if convicted, the punishment is either death penalty or life without parole. So when we talk about the prongs that a jury has to take into consideration, it's a future dangerousness. Is this person the type of person that being in prison alone will prevent any future danger to the community or people in the prison population? And I think when we look at Ms. Gonzales, there's an argument to both ways, right? The type of violence that she's typically prone to is abuse against children and her daughters, which is not something that she's going to be around in a prison facility. However, if a jury were to convict her of capital murder, we now have a gruesome murder in 2018, and we have intentional acts in 2024 that are violent. And I think a jury could look and say, look, she's not able to be rehabilitated and she is a future danger to society. So it would be interesting to watch that phase of trial if a jury convicted her of capital murder.
She has at least 8 children, multiple fathers. We were told between 6 and 7 fathers. The father of Ava reportedly is in Mexico. So this is an investigation that crosses international borders. Just as a former prosecutor, when you look at this and you're trying to build a case, when you have so many different players involved, I mean, how difficult, just looking at the landscape of this story, would it be to build a case against Virginia Gonzales and just figure out what exactly happened to this little girl?
Well, you need a good investigator because you've got to hunt these people down. You've got to get them to agree to meet with you. I mean, you can subpoena a witness, but in the end of the day, as a prosecutor, you want to put people on the stand that you think are building your case, not tearing it apart. And so it's a lot of dealing with people, and the type of people you're going to be dealing with aren't always going to be model witnesses. They're going to have marked up records and things of that nature that the defense can harp on. So it's difficult, but on a case like this, I imagine a good prosecutor and a good investigator, they'll strap their boots on and get it done. Meet with witnesses, woodshed witnesses, learn about what life was really like in Ms. Gonzales' world, and figure out if the case is there.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens next. This plea deal, closing a chapter in one sense, but this story is far from over. Anthony Asso, criminal defense attorney, former assistant district attorney. Thank you as always for taking the time to walk us through these cases. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
That will do it for this episode of On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and now you can watch episodes of On the Case on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.